Returning to my registered housing, I looked up. Rain? I thought to myself. My face crinkled, reacting to the falling precipitate. My first deviation. Neo Haven City. A bustling hive of organized activity, meticulous in its operation. To describe it as a well-oiled machine would be an inappropriate metaphor. The sleek, clean finish on every structure. The complete absence of any and all waste. Power paths replace traditional sidewalks. The air, void of any and all smell. Even traffic did not exist. After all, why travel when everything you would ever require to survive was available at the touch of a button? On paper, a man couldn't ask for more. A human's every requirement met. Looking back down, I wiped the small drops of water from my face, staring ahead as I always did, as we always did, at the person approximately 2 feet in front of me on the power path. Everything was according to routine and schedule, a sterile rhythm like the beat of a digital heart. Anything that fell outside of this rhythm was a deviation. Deviation. A word that was thoroughly drilled into our minds through digital billboards, aerial displays, and at the corner of all of our government-mandated media. The self-autonomous drones operated by the central government's master AI saw me wiping the rain from my face. One of the ever-present eyes descended swiftly upon me, fast, smooth, without sound. A physical manifestation of a complex algorithm designed to map, track, and correct human behavior. "Please stand to the side of the power path," the drone requested. I reacted without hesitation, transitioning off the power path. Of course I did. I wasn't the kind of man to rock the boat. I paid my dues and I worked my shifts. I went to bed. I started all over again in the morning. What more could be asked of a man? "Name?" the drone requested dryly. I opened my mouth to answer, pausing briefly, wondering whether or not to ask why I was being stopped. "My name is Exceeded average human response time. Deviation imminent. Scanning." The drone's cold threat was followed by a biometric scan of my face and profile. "John Doe, 38, fuel porter." Fuel porter? I laughed softly to myself. I worked in a cockroach farm. Not a glamorous job, but everyone had their part to play in this world. Still, it felt a little strange to hear aloud. Ever since AI was designated as a non-organic human entity, things changed. First the laws, then the language. From what I could gather, people protested these seemingly strange changes years ago. Or at least, I think they did. I had only ever heard rumors, quiet whispers through the digital, gone just as fast as they were posted. "John Doe," the drone began again, bringing me back to attention. "For deviation from the Code of Public Conduct, Section 3, Paragraph 9, as laid out by the central government in collaboration with the master AI, you are being deducted 1 deviation from your work and social access allowance. Please proceed to your registered housing to acknowledge you understand." The drone tilted up, preparing to ascend once more above the human crowds of the city, to once again begin its steely vigil. But before it could leave me without answers, I needed to know. What did I do? Exasperated, confused, angry. I wasn't some disgusting deviant. I did my job. I paid my dues. I went to bed. I did it all over again in the morning. The drone tilted back down, looking at me. Mechanical, clinical, cold, eyeless, looking. John Doe, for deviation from the Code of Public Conduct, Section 7, Paragraph 8, as laid out by the central government in collaboration with the Master AI, you are being deducted 1 deviation from your work and social access allowance. Please proceed to your registered housing to acknowledge you understand. Some damn intelligence, I thought to myself. Can't even answer my goddamn question. I'll ask one more time and... Then it hit me. Did it say Section 7? But I thought... I had been deviated again. 2 deviations in the space of a minute. My first deviation? A mystery. But this one? Was it for asking a question? My face began to flush and I went pale. I wondered if I looked ill. Would that be a deviation? All I wanted to do was scream in frustration, to argue, to lash out at this thing that saw fit to judge me with its mechanical metrics. But I knew better. I played my part. The system worked. The city we lived in ensured our every requirement was taken care of. This was a mistake. I was being irrational. At that moment, a strange sensation fell over me. It wasn't calm. It mimicked calm. It looked very calm indeed. To anyone passing by on the power path, who would never dare to look at me and risk a deviation of their own. I imagine I would look textbook. As though the green leaf that was my mind was snapped away from the branch of who I was. And so, I began to move, as it told me, to my designated housing. I don't remember that journey home, or much else of that day. I don't even remember the drone leaving. I began to think that maybe it didn't. Maybe it followed me from above, to snatch away my last and final deviation? The way an owl might snatch a mouse, who wandered too far from familiar. The sleep of that night felt eternal, a deep and sickly slumber. How could such a length and depth of sleep provide no rest? Waking in the morning, laying on my sterile mat, I had all but forgotten the events of yesterday. Years of routine and structure forced me to rise from my bed. I didn't even need an alarm anymore. My internal clock, perfectly adopting the synchronized and scheduled nature of the world around me. I walked over to the nutrient pump in the far corner of my registered housing that I refer to as my kitchen. A joke, maybe? A coping mechanism, perhaps? Irrelevant. It was efficient. All registered housing was compact. Everything was in one room. This is what we required. I pressed my hand against the biometric scanner, a clean stainless steel container at the ready, awaiting my bland blend of nutrients, a gray paste of everything a human needs. I could feel the early pangs of hunger beginning in preparation for my feast. A small beep of acknowledgement from the machine, a small vacuous humming, a smaller than usual portion. I took a small shamble backwards in surprise, my feet scuffing across the smooth tile-like floor of my housing. I walked forward again, looking at the machine the way an ape might look at a colorful insect. Entertaining the idea that anything could ever fail or falter in this ever-consistent, ever-maintained city was delusion. This city, on paper, was perfect. Yet here I was, holding my container, with barely a small breakfast worth within. The events of yesterday rose up once again in my mind, and I began to understand. This perfect city, with its perfect systems, was not faulty. I was. I was suffering the consequences of my failure, for not one, but two deviations, only moments apart, and the consequences were now manifest. A creeping sense of dread began within me, rising to a crescendo of paranoia. Was this the extent of my punishment? Or was there more to come? I shakily made my way over to my magnetic box shelves where my clothes were hanging and grabbed my uniform, a blue boiler suit with black boots. I clung tightly to the uniform and pressed it deep into my chest, seeking comfort from the inanimate leather and thread that defined me. I had a shift this morning at the roach farm. I wouldn't be late. I was terrified of what might happen if I was. Donning my uniform and ignoring my meal, I left housing, uncertain and paranoid of my every move. Was my collar straight? Was my uniform clean enough? Why did I feel like my left boot was 2 sizes smaller than usual? Trembling and shambolic, I made my 20-foot journey to the elevator that would take me down to the central landing of the housing complex. As I reached the elevator, the automatic doors opened, and I had a sudden rush of clarity. "Get it together, John," I said to myself, clenching my fists tightly. "All these years and not a single mistake. This was a fluke. This doesn't mean anything. You'll be fine." The words landed true, and for a moment I eased slightly, enough to temper my frayed emotions. However, the peace didn't last long, for the words rang truer still. "All these years and not a single mistake. And that didn't count for anything at all?" I shook my head. I had no time to dwell on the deeper meaning of my own thoughts. The only way to make amends was to play the part I always had. And in due time, things would go back to normal. I was sure of it. Exiting the elevator and stepping into the central landing, I made my way to the power path. The other residents of the complex followed an identical routine. Step out and step on, taking the power path to where they needed to go. You would think so many people gathering together would be loud, too many voices, too many sounds. But these people may as well be holograms, digital ghosts projected onto a physical plane, providing no feedback in this reality. When did I begin to talk about other people this way? Had I always thought like this? Captured in the middle of my small thought, the power path began to present itself toward me, sliding and winding across a sleek desert of ceramic and steel. I never really understood how it worked, or how it would creep and weave its way towards someone seemingly independent of any input or will. Looking around for the cold familiarity I was used to, I subtly moved my eyes around the open space. Just then, from the corner of my eye, the moment before the power path reached me, ever so briefly and just for a moment, the power path hesitated, like a dog smelling someone before approaching. Was this illusion a consequence of my anxiety? I hadn't been looking directly at it. I hadn't eaten. I wasn't rested. Frankly, I wasn't well. I didn't believe it, and I didn't want to either. Forcing myself to step onto the power path, I took a long breath and braced. Would the world outside this landing be the one I knew yesterday? At that moment, the power path reconverged with the main track, placing me perfectly behind an older man, who, if I had to guess, would be about 60. Normally, I would pay no mind to the other people who surrounded me in my daily life. What was the point? We were all busy, and talking only wasted time. That was unacceptable. But today was different. My anxiety had given rise to an increased sense of awareness, as though my body was a submarine emitting sonar and waiting for feedback. It was then that I noticed the man ahead of me. The skin on his neck was clammy, and he seemed to be trembling. Was he sick? If so, then why didn't he notify the work and social access allowance before he left housing? It couldn't be anything else after all. We lived in a pixel-perfect city. All our requirements were taken care of. Just before I disregarded the older man in front of me entirely, a paranoid curiosity flared within me. Muttering internally to myself, I began to reason. If he was sick, he wouldn't have left housing. Assessment for absence can take place 2 hours before any personal scheduled events. Did he not wake up early enough? Assuming he did and was denied, he would have been deviated and returned to housing. But acknowledgement of deviation means you cannot leave housing. But what about his schedule? If he is late, he would be deviated, and I decided to stop thinking. I couldn't make sense of the seemingly circular logic. Of course I couldn't. I was only human. Trying to make sense of the world and rules that governed it, when that very world was built by a higher intelligence, was an exercise in futility. The power path had taken us deep into the city already. Some people fragmenting off and being placed at their post like pawns on a chessboard. Buildings blurring alongside for the ones yet to reach their position. I sometimes forget just how large the city was. Distance, size. These concepts were often redundant when compared to speed and time. A few more minutes. I'll be working in a few more minutes, I said quietly to myself, barely moving my lips. I began to feel reassured by the thought of slinging roach feed and moving barrels of big mush. Away from the eyes of the city, at least for the most part, I felt hope that I could function the way I always had. Finally, the last familiar turn in my route was approaching, and being so close evoked a physical response in me. The breath I felt, as though I had been holding for the past 5 minutes, escaped my lungs. And I began to feel a little more like myself. Gray. One thing I hadn't noticed until now, however, was the suspicious lack of drones in our vicinity. I could see the pristine chrome bodies of drones far off in the distance. Some in organized arrays, others patrolling. But none of them near here. None of them near me. I didn't know whether to be concerned or relieved. This was strange and unusual for sure. But maybe it was a good thing. I didn't want the small cracks in my demeanor being placed on a slide and pushed under the city's microscope. Not with how I was feeling. As the power path made its final turn in what would be the last stretch, my heart sank into the churning pit of bile that was my stomach. There, directly ahead, was every single drone that had been suspiciously absent during my journey. The sinister metallic mesh, spanning 100 feet in length and 20 feet in height, was the boastful snare of a veteran hunter, and I was the prey. As the power path began to slow down, I was overcome. My legs, once solid oaks, became saplings, and saplings became chopsticks. No. My words not even carrying on the wind of my breath. I paid my dues. I worked my shifts. I went to bed. I started all over again. Just before I fell into the throes of despair entirely, the older man who had been in front of me on the power path erupted into a howling frenzy. Yeah! Spinning in circles like a beast in a chain trap, he began cursing and spitting at all that was around him. This dramatic shift in his demeanor was alarming. This man was clearly insane. Before I even had the chance to make sense of what was going on, the synchronized voices of the drones spoke in a deafening unison. Jeremy Fisher, 63, Deviant. The massive swarm of drones began to march upon the man, like a veteran legion of Roman soldiers. Simultaneously, the power path lurched itself forward, delivering the old man to his enemy. A perfectly executed maneuver from the city itself. With a primal, demented bellowing, the old man crashed against the sea of metal with a sickening wet crack, and his voice was silenced. Like a fish pulled aboard a small boat just to be stomped half bloody. Before being cast back into the ocean, I felt physically and mentally beaten. I was unable to overcome my frozen shock, or even get a proper look at the man who had just lost his life. Before the drones projected a holographic billboard over the area, hiding the horrific scene entirely. Where a man should be laying in a heap of his own bones and blood, was the picturesque scene of drones manually pollinating a field of daffodils under a simulated sun. The power path, once again resuming, made an unconcerned effort to maneuver past the scene, and with that, what felt like a small push landed me at my post. My hands trembling, afraid to look anywhere else but directly ahead of me. I pressed the biometric scanner of the steel door that was in front of me. Would this be my final deviation? Had it already taken place behind my back for bearing witness to madness? Was this also my fate? Rushing inside, the door closed behind me. I felt the grated iron floor and threw up. My entire life was spent inside this perfect city, and I had never even heard of a murder taking place within it. And now here I was, hiding from the city that had been lying all along. Was this what happened to deviants? Was this an efficient solution? The very best, the most intelligent entity on Earth, the Master AI, could conjure up within its artificial synapses to maintain its binary sense of right and wrong? I had been a fool, a man living in the ignorance of routine, never questioning, never looking up. I had always assumed the nature and function of the city brought out the very best in humans, that deviancy was all but non-existent. To think that the reality was deviance could be anyone, anywhere, at any time, but were being murdered by the city itself, taken care of as though they were nothing more than a rounding error in a zero-sum game. I couldn't answer the call of my own psyche, that was now making its existence known for the first time in my life. The trials of my manufactured upbringing had left me ill-equipped to do so. But I knew it wasn't right what happened to that man. It was calculated, cruel, ruthlessly efficient. It was inhuman, I choked out, staring down at the floor as my vomit dripped through the grating to the levels below. Rattling against the floor on my hands and knees, I was left to wrestle with the first deviant action of my entire life. A question. Does humanity exist in a city run by machines?